Hello, welcome back to Missy's Imaginings, to the Sewing Center here. And today I'm going to be drafting a pattern for the Resin Soul 70 centimeter male body, which is the body for my David Tennant. So I got him finished, or I got him put together. He's a little kicky, so I may have to restring. As I mentioned, the elastic I think is kind of old. But he looks good. I like his face. The other thing that I did for him is I cut a little piece of clear vinyl. I tri-folded it for the thickness that I wanted, cut it in just a curved shape, and I use it as a shim because his head is a little, it doesn't quite want to stay in the position where I want it. So by putting that little shim in there, I don't have to worry about sueding or anything. It works. So his head will hold whatever position I want it to. So that worked well. I also finished his wig. In the previous video, I gave the steps on sewing it together, and this is what I was talking about in the reasoning for having the fur to come forward in the front and down in the back. It just gives what I think is a more natural hairline. If all the fur is going the same way, it's hard to get any of the bang or forward hair to come forward the way you might want it to. So by having it forward and then tucking up that hemline, then this fur is free to come forward, or you can always brush it back, but it looks more like hair growing because it can come forward if you want it to. And so that's why I always like the two pieces to make the crown of the wig rather than just one piece. So anyway, that's how his wig turned out. He got the sideburns coming in, and I probably should shift it a little bit so it fits a little bit better. But, well, then I can just knock it off. That's always exciting as well. So we'll pull it back on there. Sorry, David, didn't mean to make you bald there. So I like his wig. I think it turned out the way I wanted it to. And if you'd like the pattern for that, you can go to Missy's Imaginings and grab the pattern. It's a free PDF download on the ready to print page. So today we'll go ahead and draft a pattern for him because obviously all he has is underwear and he needs a suit. And so in order to do that, I need my basic pieces to make the pattern. I always like to do the basic pieces for a doll because that way you can draft any other pattern that you want from those pieces. So what we're going to be doing today is not actually the clothing pattern, but it will be the basic pieces of this body type from which you can draft any design. The things you'll need will be some clear plastic kitchen wrap. I like to get some that has a good cling to it, just so that it'll stick to itself when you're wrapping the body. I've seen this method done a couple other times, but they used like masking tape and just applied it to an older doll. I don't want to put adhesive on my dolls, so I use the clear wrapping because that way it protects the doll. I also like to use the invisible tape. It's the kind that looks frosted, so it's not the real clear shiny stuff, but the frosted, because you can mark on it well with a pencil and it'll stay. If you use the real shiny stuff, it tends to wipe off, or you can't mark it very well and you can't see your lines. I was able to get 4 boxes, and so this roll and then these 3 in, a package at Walmart for about $4. So it's pretty cheap. So that's the kind of tape I like to use, and it's pretty economical if you need a lot of tape. So the other thing you'll need is scissors and a long ruler so that your long pieces for the legs, if you want them to be more straight, you can use a ruler for that, a pencil and an eraser. Then when I'm actually drafting the patterns, I always like to use Sharpie, a regular and a fine point, and then corrector tape if I make any mistakes. So that's the things that you'll need, and what we're going to do is go ahead and get started. Alright, so now we're going to grab some pieces and rip off the saran wrap, and I'm going to start with a leg. Now I always wrap just one side of the doll because you can duplicate obviously the other sides. So I'm going to start by wrapping his leg nice and snug, with the saran wrap or the kitchen wrap. And then usually I don't use really long pieces unless I'm doing the length of the leg. And so I'm going to cover that with tape to kind of mummify this poor guy, which is what we're going to do. So when you get that wrapped up, then I'm going to seal that up with tape and cover his body with the saran wrap and the tape. And you want to make sure that your tape is staying just on the saran wrap, but not on your doll, because like I said, I don't like to get adhesive on the doll itself. Now, with the doll pretty much mummified on one side, I might add a little bit more around his knees here. There we go. And here is some saran wrap. Now, the form is all in the tape. So the next step is going to be, I'm just checking for all my little nooks and crannies. The next step, oh, I see a couple more, is going to be to mark this tape where I want to cut the pieces apart. Okay, so now I'm going to use my pencil and I'm going to mark the places where I want. So now a guy's waist is usually not right in the center, but usually they're a little bit lower, so I'm just going to go a little bit lower than his actual waist, and I'm going to mark the waist. I'm going to go straight up the center to the neckline. But see how that pencil marking works really well on this tape, because it lends itself to being able to do that. And then straight through the inseam down here where the inseam will come, and then all the way around to the center back. There we go, up to the base of the neck, then around, and I will mark the center of the back of the neck here, and around the neckline. So what I'm doing now is marking where I'm actually going to cut these pieces apart. Okay, so now the patterns are marked. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut on the lines, being careful not to cut my little underwear, but I'm going to cut the lines and cut these pieces off. Now sometimes you can do it with just a good pair of scissors, and sometimes you might need an X-Acto knife just to kind of get up underneath the pieces, but I didn't wrap him quite as tight, so I should be able to just use the scissors. So when you start cutting these pieces off, yes, you're going to have lots and lots of layers of saran wrap, but that's okay because we're going to peel a lot of those off. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and start down here, some of the looser pieces. And I want to cut the tape. Some of the saran wrap might take a little bit more cutting, but that's okay. You just kind of cut it off. So again, I will go ahead and speed up the tape at this point. Now that we have the pieces done, throw away the trash. We'll put him over here. You end up with the sleeve here, and I always peel out any of the unnecessary saran wrap. If you've got a lot of webbing in here that kind of is pulling, I'll kind of cut that out and throw it away. So I'll stack that. Now some of it's connected, so you just have to be careful not to cut out your pattern piece, but we'll get rid of some of the webbing here that's not necessary. Because if you get that out, then it'll kind of lay a little bit better when you go to actually put it on to the paper. So there we go. Also, I'm going to mark the front and the back. So this is my front. This is the back. And this was on him like this. So this is the front. And that's the back. This is the back. This is the front. So I'm going to finish cutting out all the saran wrap here. Our basic pieces, and now we're going to transfer this information onto paper so that we'll have actual nice pattern pieces. Alright, so the next step is I can see already that my pieces are going to be too long for the paper. I can make it a little bit longer. I can use the full length of the paper, I suppose. So we'll cut it here, not this. And then this one right here. So some assembly will be required. So I'm going to cut this, and this is going to be the back A and the back B. This will be the front A and the front B. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that length, just like that. So now when I draw it onto the paper, I'm going to try to lay this as flat as possible. And since this is real curved, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll snip here, and I'll snip here, so that it'll lay a little bit more flat. And then of course that's going to end up being a dart. So now, lay my pieces on, and I always give at least, an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch outside of these pieces, because if you try to sew this exact size, then you're going to come up too small. So I'm just going to trace around the pieces I have here. Okay. And then this, of course, is going to be where I would place a dart. Just the edge there. And this is just kind of rough. And then often, as I'm actually sewing, then I'm also going to make adjustments to my pieces. So there you can see I just kind of go all the way around there to make that piece. And I'm going to label that same as I did. Now this can go in the trash. Now I'll do the same for this piece. Okay, so now you can see very rough pieces, and this collar I trace so that there's a center front if you want to have like a mock turtleneck with a back opening. This I mark the center back, which is what you'd use to shape collars on like a front button-down shirt. Also, I indicated a little bit of a squiggle here. This is where the overlap is going to be to attach the lower leg to the rest of the leg patterns. The next thing to add before I actually do the marker though is I'm going to put a seam allowance around each piece. So each piece would have a 1/4 inch, and I kind of made these close together so they're going to end up kind of close together. I don't add a seam allowance on my center front, just as a reminder that that's an actual center, which if you want something that's going to be totally a front piece rather than pieced together, this would be your center front. So I would always place that on the fold, center front, and then I would indicate that that can be done on a fold. But of course you can change that pattern piece according to what you're actually going to be making. Now if you were to sew these pieces together, all you would get was the mummified covering bodysuit that the tape formed when it was taped around the doll. But you know, if you want to make a bodysuit to wear underneath clothing, then this is perfect. And then you just sew these pieces. But I do allow a little bit of extra around the pieces also because it's hard to get a folded or a curved piece of the mummified tape saran wrap to lay perfectly flat on the paper. So, and here I didn't leave enough for seam allowance, did I? Well, I'm going to have to adjust that, I suppose, on the other side. So I'll make that a little bit, but then I'll add a little bit more than a 1/4 inch over here to my pieces to allow, because I didn't move it far enough. So we'll come up here to the dart. there we have all the pieces that are the basic pieces for a resin sole 70 centimeter male body. So we have the front and back of the legs, the sleeve, the back of the torso or short shirt, the front of the shirt, and the collar. So those are the items that are the basic pieces you would need. Now I would just simply go in and fine tune and make them, you know, pretty so that they look nice, and have instructions for the overlap, instructions for the center front for if you're going to place that on a fold. Of course, if you're going to do a button-up shirt, you would have to add the allowance for the overlap for a button-up shirt, and in that case the back you would only use the center back. So this line would be indicated as the center back rather than the overlap here. So those are your basic pieces on forming that doll. So there we go. Those are the basic pieces. Then to draft any pattern, you would use these as a base. So that's how I go about making a pattern for any kind of doll. And it's not that difficult. It's a little time consuming, but you know, you can try it on any size and see how it works for you. I will also finish this pattern up and go ahead and I'll put the basic pieces on the website. There's some other ones on there that you can help yourself to, some different kinds of dolls in different sizes. So these again are not a clothing piece, but the basic pieces from which you can draft your own designs. So have fun, try it and see how it goes, and yeah, enjoy. I think that's about it for now. It's been a long video, so I'll go ahead and wrap this one up. But thanks, and I hope you'll come back again. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.